again, thank you all for being here. This is Commercial Leasing 101. If you're not sure if you're in the right place, you're here for that. That's what we're going to talk about today. So again, thank you for being here. I am Andy Costello. I am a commercial real estate broker licensed on both sides of the river. But what we're going to talk about today doesn't really matter where you're located or where you're looking to lease space, because what I'm going to talk about is general and applies to any location. I'm physically located in Vancouver, which obviously services the whole Portland metro area. I have been investing in real estate since 2011. Prior to getting my license 5 years ago, I had 15 years in local government. And last year, I had leased or sold over 350,000 square feet of real estate, about $36 million. And so when you look at that square footage, I think that's something like 20 football fields or something. I did the math. So I've been in this business not super long time, but have done a lot of business in a relatively short period of time. So I'm going to share some of my experience and some of my things that have happened with the clients that I've worked with. And just want to remind everybody, I am not a CPA or an attorney. When I do help people lease space, I always say, if you want to talk to an attorney, you should certainly feel comfortable to do that, because that's not my legal role. But I just want to make sure that people have as much information as possible, whether you decide to work with me or another broker. It's always good to be informed, since most of the time, until you've started a business, you probably knew nothing about leasing or anything in the commercial real estate world. So today, in the time that we have together, and again, I will get you out on time, we're going to talk about some basic lease structures that you might see when you're looking at space, some of the language that's used in leasing, some of the things to watch out for, and then just kind of how to get started if you're thinking about leasing some space. We will have some time for Q&A. And if you have some detailed questions, we certainly can take those offline. My contact information is at the bottom of every slide, as well as at the end of the presentation. So for those of you on the call today, please put in the chat where you're at. Are you looking at signing a first lease? Are you expanding your business and looking at a second location? Are you shrinking locations? Are you maybe looking at your first lease renewal or some other situation that you're on the call today? Thanks, Brandy. I see you're looking at your first lease. If everybody could just put a letter in there, that would be great. No pressure. I just kind of want to know what kind of audience who I'm talking to today. Thank you, Allison and Ayla. Appreciate that. That's just helpful, just so I know where we're starting with. And Beth, thank you. You're looking at your first lease renewal. Okay, thank you both, or all, for sharing that. So a little bit about the lease structures. There's three basic lease structures that when you get into the business that you might start looking at. The first one is a full service lease. So this is when your base rent is going to cover all the operating expenses for a building. So your rent is just one flat fee, typically will include your utilities and things like that. A modified gross lease, and I'm going to get into more details with some separate slides on these. These are just high level overviews. The modified gross lease is where the tenant's going to pay the rent plus maybe your share of utilities. So for example, you might be in an office building, a small office building that has a shared meter for water. So you might be paying a portion of your water, but then there's a separate electric meter. So you're going to pay your own electric, your own internet, but you're going to pay kind of a split on your utilities. And then the last type is a triple net lease, where you're going to pay your prorated share based on the size of the space that you're leasing. So if you're a third of the building, then you're going to pay a third of those expenses. So a triple net, that was the last lease that I just talked about, and I want to explain some of the language before we get into this a little bit deeper into the presentation. So when we are looking at a lease, which is typically a retail space, this is what you're going to pay in addition to your base rent. So let's say the base rent is $15 a square foot a year, and then the lease language will often say next to it NNN, which stands for triple nets. So this is what you're going to be charged in addition to that base rent for things like your property taxes, your insurance, and your common area maintenance. So these are just some of the expenses that the landlord's going to pass on to you based on the size of space that you're leasing in there. What might be included in all of those charges? So some of those that I just listed are just a small list. They're probably going to pass on your management of, they've hired a company to manage that building, the building maintenance and repairs. So when it needs a new roof, exterior painting, the parking lot needs to be repaved. There's the common area landscaping outside in the parking lot. they're going to pass all these expenses. If there's parking lot lights, those are utility expenses that are going to be passed on as part of your triple nets. So there's a lot of things that when you look at a lease, you might be paying that $15 a year per square foot, but then your triple nets might be an additional $3 a square foot a year to cover these types of expenses. So landlords are always trying to recoup their costs of what they're what they're paying onto their tenants. So there's no free ride when you're looking at commercial leasing. So the next language that we use in this business is called a TI. So a tenant improvement. So this is when a tenant, you might have an empty shell, like a picture there, or there's maybe just drywall in the space. You now need to put up some rooms. Maybe you're a music business and you need to put up some teaching rooms, or you're looking at opening a restaurant. So you've got to put in a bar, maybe some restrooms that aren't there. So these are things that typically the landlord is not going to fund 100%. And if they do, they're going to be getting it back in terms of higher rent that you're going to be amortized over the course of your lease. And so if a landlord is looking at either giving you some money or putting those expenses in upfront and paying for them and getting them back over the life of the lease, they're going to look at which, are you a viable business? Are you credit worthy? Have you been in business for a while? And then looking at, whether they're always going to get their money back. So if it's listed, let's say the space for lease at $20 a square foot, and then they're going to do all these TIs for you, they're going to make sure that they get their money back. So now you rent, I'm just dealing with this with tenant right now. We started at $23 a square foot, and now his lease base rate is up to $26.50 because the landlord wants to amortize and get his money back for building out the office space. So these are things that when you are looking at leasing space, you need to make sure that you have enough money to be coming forward with the TIs, because even if a landlord is going to be funding, giving you some of that cash, let's say they're willing to give you $50,000 for TIs, that is what they are going to reimburse you for after you show invoices using a licensed bonded contractor. They're not just going to give you the $50,000 for you then to go hire somebody or for you to do the work yourself. So just some considerations to think about there. So something else to how this process works. So when it comes to those triple nets, you as a tenant will have the ability to look at what their expenses are and kind of review the charges, but you really don't have any control over what the landlord is paying their management company or what they're paying to surface that parking lot. So you can see what kind of charges they're passing on to you, but unfortunately you don't really have a lot of control of what they're spending. One of the other terms in this business is the usable square footage of a space versus rentable square footage. So you might be renting 2,500 square feet. And so that's the whole space, but what's usable is maybe only 2,300 square feet. And this comes into play particularly when you're looking at a full service type lease, or in a building where you're renting, what you can use in your space is 2,300 square feet, but the landlord's getting back the payment for all the common areas, the hallways, the staircases, the elevators, that grand lobby you might have when you walk into that office building. So you want to make sure that you might be looking at a space that's 1,300 square feet, but what you're going to pay for is 1,500 square feet. So make sure that you understand the difference between those two when you're talking either to a broker or when you're reading your lease. And then also making sure that you understand the difference between a commencement day, which isn't always the same day. So you're going to sign a lease that's going to commence and begin on June 1st, but you are not going, so you may or may not be paying rent on that June 1st, but you might not be moving in until December 1st because you have those tenant improvements and the contractors and they're doing the work to make the space ready for you to use for your business. So also make sure that you understand when are you paying rent versus when you might be starting your business, because they could be totally two different things. Rarely is a space exactly move-in ready for your exact business. That is just very, very uncommon to find. I think I've only ever happened that happen twice without some work needing to be done on a space. So some of the things that might get a business into trouble that you should be thinking about is making sure that you understand that your business is zoned to happen in that business. You don't want to have a car detailing business and find out that you are located in a retail space where the city may or may not allow for that type of use, even though it might be perceived as a retail use. But you want to make sure that if you're not kind of in a standard business where you're an insurance company and you're going to operate out of an office space, that's very common, and that's not a problem. It's when you maybe have a unique business that you're just not sure if that zoning is going to be permitted. So again, you don't want to sign a 5-year lease and then find out you can't operate your business there because it's not zoned for what you want to do. And then making sure you understand what your business needs are, either through a business plan or working with a business coach or something where you're forecasting for the future. You don't want to sign a 7-year lease and realize you've tripled your staff size, or your business is growing way faster than you thought. And then now you're stuck in a lease because landlords don't let you out of a lease, and you are signing a personal guarantee, which says you are going to be occupying that space for 7 years. So make sure that you understand it, or have at least a thought. I mean, we can't all predict where our businesses are going to go, but you want to make sure that you understand, what you're signing and what that time commitment is for your business. So speaking of timing, we also want to talk about timing. Everything in this business takes longer than you think it should, and probably costs twice as much. So when you're looking at signing that lease, it takes probably at least 30 days to, find the space, tour the space, and then write up what we call a letter of intent to express your interest in a building. Then it's going to take some time for the landlord to send over the lease. We're going to review the lease. We might negotiate some concepts in the lease, and then for you to sign it and then actually get the keys. And then again, as I said, once you get those keys, doesn't necessarily mean the space is going to be ready. If you have to go get building permits, you have to find a contractor, you might be bidding out the work. And then for the actual work to get done, I mean, construction was tight before COVID, but of course we all know about the supply chain challenges that contractors are having. And then when the contractor turns it over to you, you have your occupancy permits. Now you have to maybe go in there and set up your business the way that you want to be operating. So make sure you really understand that things are taking a really long time, and always have been and will continue to do so. So if you think that you're ready to do something maybe in December, you should probably be thinking about making plans and thinking about those steps and how long this is going to take today. I don't almost think you can start early enough in this business, just the way that things take so much time. And then when it comes to your renewals, make sure you understand in your lease what your responsibility is to notify the landlord about your renewal. So I've seen leases where you have to notify your landlord a year in advance of that lease expiring, whether you're going to commit to that renewal or whether you need to, to tell them already that you're not going to stay in the space and renew that lease. So make sure, again, when you sign your lease, that you understand those major dates in your lease, because you don't want to end up stuck renewing a lease that you never wanted to renew because you didn't give the landlord enough time. So make sure you understand everything takes longer than you think, costs more than you think, and make sure you understand what those timelines are. Something else that businesses sometimes don't always think about is, again, everything costs a lot of money. So if you are thinking about moving to a new space, understanding what those costs are going to be for you to relocate your business. It's obviously much harder to move a restaurant and do the build out than it is to maybe move an office location. So make sure you understand what that's going to cost. And then make sure that you understand some buildings, maybe are not as high energy efficient. And if you're the one paying the utilities, your utility costs might go up when you move. So make sure that you understand that. And then again, understand that tenant improvements can cost a lot of money. Most of the time I'm seeing tenant improvements at least 6 figures, depending again on what your business is. But things just take a while and they cost a lot of money. So just make sure that you understand what you're getting yourself into, so that you're not scrambling and figuring out that you've run short. And we see this, right? We see businesses sign leases. I was just talking to a property owner yesterday that he has a brewery that leased out his space. They signed a 7-year lease and they've run out of money. So that tenant is still paying that lease, even though they're never going to open there because they ran out of money on their tenant improvements. So the landlord's really not in a hurry to find a new tenant because he's still getting paid. So no matter what happens to your business, you still have to make those lease payments. So I cannot emphasize that enough to make sure you understand that you are personally responsible for those lease payments. So some things to think about right now in this market, landlords still have a lot of leverage. And so as a tenant, they're not giving their space away, even when it comes to office space, despite what everybody says. I'm very, very bullish on office space. I don't think it's going to go away forever. I mean, we're not in New York City, so that's a different situation. But in the Portland area, this is a very, very hot market for any asset class. So think about, like, you as the tenant, do you have any leverage? I'll be honest with you, right now, tenants really don't have a whole lot of leverage for almost any asset class. Again, unless you're looking at leasing, 150,000 square feet of office, now you have some leverage. If you're looking at leasing 1,500 square feet, not so much leverage. Again, what is your time frame? When do you plan on being in that space? Because if you plan on being in that space next month, you got to start hustling today to find something to get in there. Do you have ability to sublease your space? So as I talked about earlier, you're growing faster than you think you are. Will the landlord let you find another tenant so that either they can make your payments or the landlord could then start a new lease with them and relieve you of that obligation on that space so that you can move and grow. Make sure that you read the lease. I always tell my clients, all I can do is advise you, tell you some things to look at in the lease, but it's your responsibility to make sure that you understand what are you on the hook for? What are you signing for? Every lease for a small business, unless you're Nike or Amazon, is a personal guarantee. You are telling that landlord you are going to make those lease payments for the life of your lease, no matter what happens, even despite a global pandemic. Many businesses did not have nice landlords and they were forced to still make their rent payments. And then make sure that you understand how those triple nets are going to be billed out to you. They might be monthly, they might be quarterly, or they might be annually. No matter what happens, if they undercharge you, they're going to come back at you at the end of the year and tell you you owe more money. Or if they overcharge you, they'll credit you for those triple nets for the next year. So make sure though that you understand you don't want to get hit with a huge triple net bill at the end of the year that you weren't accounting for. So make sure you understand how those bills are going to come so that you can budget for those in your business. And then make sure that you understand what does the landlord want. Again, some landlords are great. They're easy to work with. And then some are real hard asses and really are going to control things the way that they want for their tenants. So just make sure that you understand what you're getting yourself into. So for those of you here, I'm going to open my chat back up. What kind of space are you looking to lease? Are you looking for just some retail type shopping center space or a downtown space, restaurant, office, manufacturing, industrial, or other? And if it's an other, feel free to just put that in the chat. I lost my chat window, so I'm going to open that back up so I can see. We've got office, mostly office space in here, spa and suites, okay, aesthetics or beauty. Lots of that happen in the market right now. Retail, okay, thanks, Brandy. Thank you all for being so engaged. Beauty, okay, thank you. Retail and workshop, thank you guys. Thanks, Allison. I appreciate you just kind of sharing where you're at in your process. So more common questions. A lot of this industry, like any industry, has lingo. So people often ask, okay, I'm going to send you listings. Let's say you reach out to me after this call, and I'm going to send you some listings within your budget, hopefully that I can find. And so it's going to probably be listed like this, $20 triple net. And so you're going to be like, Andy, I don't really understand how to calculate what is my monthly bill going to be. So our base rents are always listed as dollars per square foot per year. So I'm going to use an example here. You tell me you want to lease 1,200 square feet, $20 a square foot. Your annual base rent is going to be $24,000 a year. And then we're going to divide that by 12. So your base rent is going to be $2,000 a month. Great. You can afford that. The thing that we always have to do a little bit more homework on is triple nets, because the triple nets are changing all the time. They're usually not advertised. So it usually requires a little bit more follow-up. So those triple nets on that space you're looking to lease are $250 a square foot a year. You're going to take that by the square footage of 1,200 square feet, and you're looking at $3,000 a year in triple nets, which is actually really, really cheap. So you're looking at $2,500 a month for your triple nets. So your total monthly rent, even though it's not listed in your lease that way, but I like to know what am I on the hook for every month? Okay, I need to come up with $2,250 a month to make my payment to my landlord. So this is how we calculate it. Maybe, I don't know, not intentionally to confuse people, but until I got into this business, I didn't really understand it either. So people are like, Andy, 24,000, that's a lot in a month. So this is how we break it down. Just want to make sure that you understand that. So let's see, next slide. So my landlord sent me their standard lease agreement. Should I just go ahead and sign it? All lease agreements are different. There are some standard forms in our industry, but there's a lot of landlords that have hired attorneys to write their own leases, or based on their experience, they have added language in to their lease agreements from things that other tenants have done in the past. So I always tell people, all I can do is advise you on what might be in your lease, but you need to read it. And if you want to hire an attorney, that's great. Most landlords are not going to change their lease language, so an attorney that you're going to hire, of course, is going to tell you there's a lot of stuff in here you should take out. And while I would love to be optimistic and tell you a landlord's going to be flexible and change a lot of stuff in their lease, that's unfortunately not usually the case, because remember, they have the control in this negotiation, unfortunately, because you want the space. So if you want the space, you kind of got to play by their rules. So I always say, yes, you should have an attorney look at it, but you should also be realistic. If you're going to pay that attorney $1,000 to review your lease, and they tell you you should get all this stuff changed, most likely there's not a lot we're going to get changed, at least at this time. So I've talked a lot about a personal guarantee. How does it work? Why is it required? A landlord is going to have you sign that lease. It's just like if you sign a mortgage on a house. You are responsible, and if you don't make those payments, the landlord, there's no landlord tenant act when it comes to commercial real estate. You really don't have, you have no protections as a tenant. You are responsible for making those payments. So I just cannot emphasize that enough, that you need to make sure you're in a place in your business where you're generating the income that you can pay those bills. So during the negotiation, you think that this landlord's not, or their representative, that they're, is relaying messages that you don't really like. How should I be worried? I tell you, you should be really worried. I had a client where we leased some space. She was in the medical industry with a landlord during COVID. The guy seemed kind of nice, but I got the sense that he was just really laid back and maybe kind of anti-masker. But in her industry, she's like, our clients have to wear a mask. And she kept trying to pull me into it after they signed the lease. And I'm like, this is between you and your landlord. If you didn't have good vibes beforehand, then you shouldn't have signed the lease if you didn't think he was going to enforce the mask mandate, and that's important to you for your business. So if you don't get good vibes, you shouldn't sign the lease. Let's go find someplace else, because it's not ever really going to get any better than it is in the beginning, just like any relationship. So I did talk a little bit in our definition sections about triple nets, modified gross, and full service. So wanted to give you an idea of when you're going to be maybe paying those triple nets versus when you're not. I had another slide after this, but so triple nets are more common in retail space. So if you're looking at having a storefront, in downtown, or downtown Camas or downtown Portland, most likely you're going to be paying your triple nets. And again, those are the costs that the landlord's passing on to you for their costs to operate and maintain the building and that location. Modified gross is more typical in like an older office building where, again, things are not separately metered. So you are going to be, paying some portion of your percentage of your space, whereas other things you are, the landlord's going to be covering for you. So you will have, some included and some not. And then a full service is typically what we call in Class A office space. So really nice office buildings, where really nothing separately metered. So everything's going to be included, that common restroom you're using down the hall, that janitorial, the hallways, the elevator maintenance, and all those permits that are required are all going to be included in a full service lease. So you're just going to pay one flat price in your lease. So again, I talked about this earlier, landlord tenant law, it does not apply. You really, unfortunately, unless you take your landlord to court, you don't have any tenants' rights. So again, when you're signing that lease, make sure you understand what you are committed to with the landlord. Most landlords have bigger pockets than all of us. So, you just don't want to start out on a bad note, but, I think COVID was kind of a wake-up call to people that maybe even had business interruption insurance that insurance companies weren't paying out on that interruption insurance because it was a global pandemic. So just make sure that you understand, what you're getting yourself into, because, we never know when we might find ourselves in the situation that we did with COVID. So how do you get started? What do you do? What are the next steps? You're just trying to figure it out. I tell people, make sure you have a budget. What are you looking at? What are your profits and losses looking like? Cash flow. If you're a new business, these are obviously all projections. If you're an existing business, these are things that you should already be having done or you should be doing. Think about your type and location and size of business. Where do you want to be? Where do you see your ideal clients or customers coming from? Where are they located? And then, understanding that that's maybe a good place that you want to be. I deal with a lot of people that, I find out that they lease space without a commercial broker, and whether it's me or somebody else, the cost for a commercial broker is paid for by the landlord. So just like when you go buy a house, it's not directly out of your pocket. Of course, over the life of the lease it is, but, it's not a direct charge to you as a tenant to use a broker. Just like I used to tell people when I was in the residential side of the business, it's not any less if you don't use a commercial broker. The landlord's not going to be like, well, I'll charge you, $1 less a square foot because you didn't use a commercial broker. Those rates are the same. And unless you're in this business, you don't really know what's happening. You don't know, okay, right now we're seeing like you can negotiate this much or you can negotiate that much, because you don't know. I'm not an expert in many things, and so I hire experts when I need them, because I don't know. I don't know what's standard in other industries. So again, whether it's me or somebody else, I cannot strongly suggest more that you should work with a commercial broker. And then you should start looking. You can look on LoopNet. There's a lot of stuff listed on there, but not everything is listed on LoopNet, which is why as a commercial broker, I spend thousands of dollars a month on access to other databases to try and find spaces for my clients. And so then once you find a space that you like, a good broker will draft a letter of intent for you to sign, which is a non-binding agreement that's telling the landlord, hey, we're interested in this space. This is when we want to start lease. This is, how much money we are asking for tenant improvements. And so again, a non-binding letter to kind of shot across the bow to tell the landlord, that you're interested in the space, so that that's your initial negotiating tool. Once you kind of have agreed on that, the landlord is going to send over the lease. You're going to review it with your broker, again, maybe your attorney. You're going to sign that lease and then take occupancy at the date, or take the keys, even if you have to have some tenant improvements done on the space. So lots of information for you today. I appreciate you joining, and you can either, if you have questions, you can either unmute yourself, you can put them in the chat. I am happy to stay on the call. We ended with a little bit of time here for Q&A, or again, my contact information is on there. Feel free to email me, text, or call me. If you want to talk about something specific to your situation, I'm happy to have conversations with anybody that might have any questions. If you don't have any questions and you're logging off, thank you again for being here today. I appreciate your time, and hope this was helpful for you.
Hi, yeah, I have a quick question.
Sure.
Hi, yeah, this is Allison. I have a question about termination clause.
Okay.
And we are actually currently working on an LOI at a space at the moment, and we feel like it's a pretty favorable termination clause of 2 months base rent. Is that a fairly average situation?
That's a very generous termination clause.
That's what I thought. That's what we figured.
Yeah, I would take that and run. I wouldn't even try to negotiate anything more.
Okay,
Most
great.
leases don't even have a termination clause, I'll be honest. So
Okay.
you are very, very lucky, and I would accept that and not even try to negotiate anything more.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Congratulations on getting through the process.
Thanks.
Yeah. Again, thank you for being here. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me after the webinar, or you can log off if you don't have any other questions. I don't have any other prepared material, but I do appreciate your time and interest in learning a little bit more so that you can be prepared with your business. Thank you, Jody and Ayla and Allison. Thank you. I don't want to cut anybody short, but I'm not going to hang on if nobody else has any other questions. So again, thank you, and hope to see you soon.